Good evening, everybody. So glad you're here. Mike Weilbacher, Executive Director of the Schuylkill Center for Environmental Education up in Roxborough. So glad that we've revived our Thursday Night Live series. So I'm grateful that so many of you are regulars to the series over the last couple of years. This was one of our responses to the pandemic, and we discovered that so many people like to Zoom into the Schuylkill Center from the privacy of their home, that we've kept this series alive. So we've got 8 consecutive weeks. This is the second. And I'll be your lecturer tonight. You're stuck with me tonight, for better or worse. So hopefully we'll have a good time. We'll have a good time together. There we go. So as you may have heard, the event is being recorded and it will be ultimately uploaded to the center's YouTube channel, where we'll have a lot of our previous Thursday Night Lives are also available, so you can check those out. Do keep your microphones on mute, but you're all Zoom veterans by now. Turn off your video if you don't want to be visible. I am screen sharing, so I use the side-by-side view. And throughout any time during the conversation, if you want a question, want to put it in chat, that would be great. At the end, Zaina will be asking questions of me, so she'll be moderating the chat. Look for Zaina Assad. Zaina is our wonderful manager of public programs. She's curating the Thursday Night Live series. So Zaina, thank you so much. She's also helping get you all into the Zoom tonight. So appreciate Zaina's work in setting up this whole series. So I'm grateful you're all here. You probably all know this. You've probably been here to the Schuylkill Center before, but we've got 4 miles of trails and we're free. So come for a walk. And as winter slides into spring, it's a great time to go for a walk. So our pair of resident Canada geese have set up shop on Fire Pond. They'll likely make a nest. Red maples are starting to bloom. It's a little early, but they're starting to bloom. This red blush, and I'll show you another flower, the first wildflower of spring, in just a moment. We are an environmental education center and do programming for people of all ages, including the kids here dipping into our pond and you all here Zooming in on Thursday nights. We founded 10 years ago already the first nature-based preschool in the state of Pennsylvania. We're so proud of that. Nature Preschool is enrolling now for the next school year. So our 3, 4, 5-year-olds are immersed in nature and the outdoors. So you want to get your kid into Nature Preschool. One of our Nature Preschool teachers is here on the Zoom. So thank you for your service. And love to have you check out Nature Preschool for children and grandchildren. We also have a great summer camp, Camp Schuylkill, one of our signature programs. So great these days to get your kid in the outdoors, active, running, jumping, climbing, hiking. So check out Camp Schuylkill. We also have the only wildlife clinic in the city of Philadelphia, one of the few in the region, staffed by remarkable people who are so dedicated to the work that they do, working on injured, orphaned, sick animals of like 150 species, including this beautiful animal. Isn't that amazing? That's a long-tailed duck that was found on a rooftop in the city, a rooftop deck, and brought to us, probably stunned, but it was healed, and we released it at the John Hines National Wildlife Refuge in Tinicum. And it's on its way back north to the Arctic. So it was flying north. It was migrating north to the Arctic Circle when it was struck. So hopefully it's on its way. This is Think Wild Month at the Schuylkill Center. We're thinking of our wildlife clinic as they get ready for baby animal season. We've got a table in the lobby of the visitor center where we are accepting donations. So we want to bury the wildlife clinic in things like, you see, garbage bags, paper towels, bleach, all kinds of things. So on our website is a list of things that we're looking for the wildlife clinic. We'd love for you to drop things off. That would be just really special. Our new art exhibition is Walking the Edge. There's a wonderful artist named J.J. Tizu, whose art practices to walk the 90-mile border of the city of Philadelphia, actually, which goes pretty close to the Schuylkill Center. He's just started his 11th walk around it last week. He does 10-mile chunks. Next Friday, a week from tomorrow, there's a group that's going to finish their 10 miles at the Schuylkill Center for a reception. And they're going to kick off Saturday morning at the Schuylkill Center with coffee. So you can come to the reception, you can come for coffee, or you can walk the 10 miles on either Friday or Saturday, or both. JJ has a sign up for his Walking the Edge walks. But the new art exhibition is art inspired by people who have walked the edges with him. So do check out, it's incredible. Quilting, map making, folk art, photography, painting, video, it's just all there and it's just really fun. So come see Walking the Edge and then come walk the edge with us as well. And there's the couple of walks happening at the center, the 24th and 25th. And you can see JJ installed this down by the Delaware River. And there we are. Schuylkill Center for Environmental Education is all the way in that direction. We are a volunteer organization. This is the fanatic planting a tree with me back on Earth Day a few years ago. Pitchers and catchers have reported to spring training, by the way, so we can get over our Eagles loss by hopefully the Phillies have another great year anyway. We also are a membership organization. Lots of you are members. We appreciate the support. Thank you, thank you. But we'd love for you to join if you're not, because members, in addition to supporting our important work, get advance notice of our programs and get great discounts of things like our wonderful bird seed. We do have a master plan happening right now. We have 365 acres. We have some important questions that we're trying to answer. So we have landscape architects working on it. You can go to our website and scan that. You can scan this right now with your phone if you're clever. I'm not with this stuff yet, but nonetheless, and you can enter a raffle to win a native plant. So check that out. But we'd love your input into our master plan. We're talking to our good friends, neighbors, stakeholders about how we best use our 365 acres. Ooh. This series ends in late March on the 23rd. On the 30th, we're having a book launching party for my first book, Wild Philly. There it is. It's out. We'll be selling it in the gift shop. We'll have a launch party for it. It's got 25 trips you can take in and around the city of Philadelphia to explore Wild Philly, plus the 101 species that make Wild Philly really cool. I worked with a team of 8 naturalists from across the region to decide who are the 101 species we're going to profile. The 25 walks take you to great places across the region at the right time of year. So you come to the Schuylkill Center for walk number 2 in April to see the trout, lily, and trillium in bloom. And there's walks for each of the wonderful seasons. So check out Wild Philly. Speaking of 101 species, this is in bloom right now. Skunk cabbage, the first wildflower of spring. It can actually melt through the ice. Not much ice this winter. And that little knob in the right side, you can see inside the purple hood. The purple looks like dead meat. The knob is full of yellow, those little yellow things are flowers. It gives off a smell that attracts flies, beetles that want dead meat carrion. They go inside, they walk around looking for the dead meat. Where's the dead meat? And they pollinate the flower. It's a crazy pollination strategy, but it works really well. Next week, Urban Wildlife Sharing Spaces will be with the staff of our wildlife clinic. So come back next Thursday on Urban Wildlife. Animals like this fox, coyotes, raccoons, beavers in Philadelphia right now. So come back next week for Urban Wildlife, and in 2 weeks, a wonderful exploration of how to turn the city from food deserts into food forests. So a thoughtful, provocative exploration of ways to increase access to food across the city. All right, so that's what's happening now, but you're here for butterflies. I'm going to stop sharing this piece right here, and I'm going to switch over to my slideshow over here. And I'm going to share it again. If I can find the control. There we are. All right. So let's walk into the world of monarchs, and looking for a title for this, I was mindful that you don't want to throw the word miracle around too casually, but I love the alliteration of it. And as we talk through the life cycle of a monarch butterfly, even if you're a scientist, you got to believe there's something miraculous about an insect that can fit in the palm of my hand. 4 generations away from Mexico, somehow having a roadmap to get to Mexico. It's an amazing story. It's an extraordinary story. So I hope you forgive me for the use of the word miracle. But before we get into the monarchs, there's a bunch of butterflies that live in our region. And I thought maybe you want to make sure you remind us all of a couple of different butterflies besides the monarch. Lots of you probably know this one, bigger than monarchs, our biggest butterfly. It's got yellow and black striping reminiscent of tigers. So there's the tiger swallowtail. This is a female. See that blue wash across the hind wings? Females have the blues. The males do not. And look at these kind of eye spots down here. So here's a female tiger swallowtail, our biggest butterfly. Love this one. Got a great dramatic stripe, like that slash. Looks kind of military. So this is the red admiral. Beautiful, beautiful butterfly. One of my favorites because this butterfly hibernates through the winter as an adult butterfly. And so on those nice days in late March when it's warm and sunny, the other butterflies are cocoons or chrysalises or caterpillars. This guy's already out. And so it flies around. It's one of the first butterflies you'll see. That chocolate brown coat seems to be reminiscent of somebody mourning, M-O-U-R. So this is a mourning cloak, the mourning cloak butterfly. For me, the first butterfly of spring, one of the great, great signs of the season. So the mourning cloak, there we go. There's a whole family, big clan of insects that are kind of halfway between butterflies and moths. They're related to butterflies, they're related to moths. They look a little bit like both. Most of them are little brown jobs that are small looking butterflies. They're very fast. So these small butterflies things kind of zip around a lot. And these are all of the skippers. Lots of skippers, and boy, are they hard to tell apart. But this one, thankfully, is really easy. See that big white blotch? Looks kind of silvery in the light sometimes. So this is a silver spotted skipper. It's also a bigger skipper than most of the others. So it's among the biggest of the skippers, and it's got that big blotch on the hind wings, so you can always tell a silver spotted skipper. One of the few skippers you'll get to know by name. And then there's this guy who is the starling of the butterfly world, the rat of the butterfly world, an invasive, non-native, imported over from Europe. It's the cabbage white, and it is sadly our most common butterfly. And actually many springs, this is the first butterfly I see, not the mourning cloak. So there's the cabbage white, the most common butterfly you'll see, unfortunately not a native. Butterflies have so many things in common, those big compound eyes, so they can see. Butterflies, of course, need to see color, but look at that mouth, that proboscis, right? Where it's got this tube that essentially sips nectar. So a butterfly drinks the world. A butterfly eats no solid food. The caterpillar does for sure, but the butterfly is sipping the world, drinking the world, nectar every day for as long as it's an adult. So there's that long proboscis usually curled up. And beautiful colors. Oftentimes, the wings on the upper side are much more brightly colored than the wings on the underside. They fold their wings up, and then they're camouflaged, open their wings, and they see this bright color like this blue. This is the blue morpho from the tropics. Stunning butterfly, huge in that metallic blue. It's just really beautiful. So butterflies use that color to tell each other who they are. So if you're a female, I'm interested in mating with you. If you're another male, this is my turf, go someplace else. That's often the case with bright colors in nature, is we want to attract a female and push away males. That's what song does in birds. In fact, butterflies have so many colors. Somebody put together this sort of iconic poster. Most entomologists have a poster, something like this, somewhere in their offices, especially if they study butterflies. But look, it's not just the entire alphabet in butterfly wings, it's all the numbers from 1 through 9. In fact, you see the 8 down here. There's a butterfly called Anna's 88. It actually has 2 8s side by side. So you've got 88s, but you can find the entire alphabet in a butterfly wing. So butterflies have wings covered in scales that are remarkably colorful, and they're used to attract mates. But here's our monarch. Here's our guy, the big, bright orange Philadelphia Flyers colored butterfly. This one is the male monarch. See these 2 dots down here on the bottom on the hind wing. Those 2 dots are glands and show it as a male. The females don't have them. So there's a female, there's male, right? See the dots, and the dots disappear. So they're slightly different color. Don't worry, no, there's a range of oranges. Also the how old it is also affects the color, and of course the lighting. So the orange isn't as important as, I want to make sure you see those dots. So next time you see a monarch butterfly, you can sex the butterfly and tell if it's male or female. Males have those dots. And the name Monarch, you know, you always think, okay, it must be because it's the biggest, or it's the most, or one of the most colorful, that bright orange. But it turns out that this was named by Linnaeus himself over in Europe, who named so many things. He invented the binomial nomenclature. So he invented the genus and species system that we now all use. But the common name monarch comes to it because it was named in like this late 1600s when King William III, you know that was King William III, right? If you're Scottish, you might know him as King Billy, but he was also the Prince of Orange. So King William III, Prince of Orange, he's actually Dutch. So, you know, there was a lot of intermarriage among the royalty of Europe. So the Dutch William becomes the king of England, but and orange is his color. And so there we go. Loyalists, people who loved King Billy named the monarch because of its orange color. They nectar, like all butterflies, on a wide variety of plants. Anything that's got good nectar, like this prairie coneflower, this coneflower, will be something that they'll come to. But as many of you know, their host plant is a really important plant we know of, milkweed. This is the common milkweed, the one that grows in roadsides and weedy places, grows like 6, 7, 8 feet tall, gets real rangy. I actually have a patch of it. I have a very small yard, and I have a driveway that has a small strip of land between the driveway and the foundation of the house and its chimney. And we moved in now more than 30 years ago, and it had common milkweed growing alongside it because the people before me were sort of sloppy gardeners. And I'm like, I was so happy. Like, I'm one of the few people who was delighted that they had a milkweed patch, 8 feet tall, alongside their house and car. And I gotta say, I can't say it enough. Around Mother's Day, this is the sweetest smelling flower you have ever met. It is unbelievable. But there's common milkweed, genus name Asclepius, which is named for the Greek god of healing, Asclepius. He was son of, who was he son of? He was son of Zeus, but a healer. The snake is one of his symbols, the snake with that transformation, that rebirth, because they shed their skin. But the caduceus, the snake around a walking stick, that was one of his symbols as well. So Asclepius, healing because the sap that's in their milk, that's in milkweed, the juice of a milkweed, sticky, right? If you've ever plucked one, it's very sticky. It's got a lot of latex in it, but it has medicinal properties and was used for a lot of things. So the milk of milkweed was used medicinally for many things. So there's the milk of milkweed. And you all know the seeds and the seed pods, I'm sure. And in the winter, this goes wafting away and carries milkweed to new places. So iconic in many ways, the milk, because kids make a mess out of it, and the seeds, because they go wafting around. But there are other Asclepius, other milkweeds. This one is butterfly weed. And if you're a gardener, this is a more gentle, this is a plant more gentle in the garden, more companionable in the garden. Only gets a couple of feet high, maybe only one sometimes. Bright orange. First time I ever saw it was back in the 70s. I was a new naturalist at a new nature center. And it's my first summer in the field. I have a new field guide, and there's this orange butterfly sitting in the field with butterflies all over it. I'm sorry, orange plant in the field with these butterflies all over it. And I'm looking through the book and keying it out, and I go, oh, butterfly weed. And I just cracked up because it had butterflies literally all over it. Of course, this is butterfly weed, but also an Asclepius. As a third species that's not uncommon in the area too. As you can see in the background, likes to grow in wet areas. So this one goes by the name of swamp milkweed, and the leaves are not as broad as common milkweed, and the flowers have a slightly different shape and a slightly different color. They're not quite the big globes that common milkweed has. It's a more flat head, and the color pink is slightly different. And here are the two side by side. Common milkweed on the left, big leaves, taller plant, swamp milkweed on the right. Those two and butterfly weed are three of the native milkweeds that become the host plants for monarch butterflies. And host plants are important. Every butterfly has the host plant. It's the plant that it's adapted to lay its eggs on. And monarchs, for better or worse, very narrowly focused and adapted themselves to milkweeds, and they can't lay their eggs, they won't lay their eggs on anything else because the young will have nothing to eat. So essentially, they lay the egg on the underside of a milkweed leaf, and they're giving birth to a child on its dinner plate. So the kid is born on its food, which is a remarkable thing to do. And typically, a monarch will go from flower plant to plant to plant and put like one to give it some space. But sometimes other monarchs might come by and lay eggs as well. So you might get more than one on a milkweed. But there you go. There's a female. I always love seeing them doing this, especially at my house or at the Schuylkill Center. And then it's fun to go back and see if you can find the egg. You try to remember which leaf it was, and then look on the underside and see if you can find the egg. And they grow up into caterpillars that are dramatically striped. They're as striking as the adult is. Big, chunky caterpillars, so they're easy to find, easy to spot, easy to remember. And they are leaf munchers, man, and they're eating that stuff, even the milk. They love the milk. They need that milk. This is part of why they've co-evolved to be together. And again, as I said, it's not unusual to see a bunch of them on one plant. So here are the caterpillars of the monarch butterfly, and they have essentially taken the stuff that's in the milk, the poisons that are in the milk, because in that milk of milkweed, there are cardiac glucosides. In other words, if an animal ate too much of a milkweed leaf, they could have a heart attack. So most animals eat tiny, tiny, tiny amounts, but nonetheless, it's bad stuff. It's not great. But monarchs especially concentrate this in the outer skeleton. And so when an animal eats it, it's not good. So here's an iconic photograph taken in the 1960s of a scientist who studied monarch butterflies. And so he fed monarchs to blue jays. And of course, blue jays never met monarch, but at least the ones he had here didn't meet them before. So he presents a monarch butterfly to a blue jay, and you can see he's ripped a wing off of this monarch, and he's begun to eat it. And then something like 10 seconds later, the poor thing retches, throws up because it's reacting to the chemical. Doesn't get the heart attack because it throws up and most of the poison goes away with it. So out comes the milk and the butterfly. And that blue jay says, you know what? I'm going to avoid orange butterflies. See these orange butterflies? I'm not going to do this anymore. And so it turns out the orange and black is not just a call to female, his or male, right? To the female saying, here I am. I'm a big, beautiful, healthy male monarch butterfly. It's also a sign to the others. I taste terrible. Remember me. And it turns out across the animal kingdom, orange and black, yellow and black, red and black are all warning colorations. So animals know that things that are boldly striped like this, be mindful of this. So yellow jackets, they can sting you. So they have that same warning coloration. Coral snakes in Florida, one of the most poisonous snakes, right? Red, yellow, black. And so you see that, you're like, okay, I'm going to stay away from you. Many, many, many do. Ooh. But then there's another insect that's co-evolved with the monarch to take advantage of this. Now notice this sort of little smile here through the hind wings, this line. So this is not a monarch. This is a monarch. And look, there's no smile. There's no line through here. Let's go back up, right? There it is. So I bet many of you know who this guy is. This is the viceroy, a very famous mimic. So not as regal as the monarch. So we'll drop it down. It's only a viceroy. And it pretends to be a monarch. It piggybacks on the distastefulness of monarch butterflies. So, you guys know, you eat an orange and black butterfly, you're in trouble. So I'm going to be an orange and black butterfly, and don't eat me, even though it tastes fine. Very smart strategy. And that strategy is used throughout the animal world. Butterflies have other really interesting strategies to avoid being eaten. I just wanted to present this one too. So here's a gray hair streak, and see the head down here, right? There's the eyes, there's the antennae. But look, up here on its wings, it sort of has invented antennae and eye spots. Lots of butterflies do this. And even better, when the hair streaks all have this little streak, when hair streaks are on a flower and resting, they'll move those two hind wings back and forth as if the antennae are quivering. So what they're saying to the birds is, see this up here? This is my head, ha, ha, ha. And so the bird will take a nip at this. It's only the back end. There's no body parts, and the hair streak flies away. So it's not unusual to see butterflies with V-shaped notches in their wings where a bird took a nip of them. So there's a gray hair streak. But back to our monarchs. Oh, there are other things when you look for monarchs in milkweed patches that also have adapted to living on milkweed and the poisons in them. So here's the large milkweed bug. Yeah, it's the full name, large milkweed bug. There must be a small milkweed bug, right? But kind of a harlequin colored insect, but look at that dramatic, right? That X with red and black. You rarely see a picture like this where a milkweed bug is by itself. More typically, you see them mating. You see them mating all the time. And then what you often will see is something like this, where there's just a pile of milkweed bugs. So this is the adults. These are when they have wings like this. And these are true bugs. Hemiptera, half wing, is the gang that they belong to. So the top half of their wing is kind of armored like a beetle, but the bottom half is not. So when they cross over, it makes kind of this dramatic X. When they're babies, here are the wings beginning to grow. These are little wing buds. And then these guys are so young over here, they don't even have wing buds yet. There's a pair of wing buds. So these are these are large milkweed bugs on their way to growing up, hanging out with a monarch who's they're all happily eating together. Here's a range map of the monarch butterfly, which is a strange and unusual range map, in that here's the monarch butterfly in North America. But look, there's a population in northern South America. But look, at the tip of Spain are some monarchs, and in like Malaysia, Indonesia, and down in Australia. Australians didn't get there until the 1870s, so it was kind of accidental. And what's weird is they are North American monarchs who got to Australia, perhaps on a boat, who knows, or blown in, I don't know, but something like the 1870s. And there is milkweed in Australia. There are milkweeds in Australia, but the weird thing is there also are invasive North American milkweeds, and that's what the ones who there prefer. So they're happily eating milkweed. So it's a very strange range map. So they've escaped and gotten into a couple of places, but they are traditionally North American insects with a little bit of slide into South America. They got to Hawaii too, and Hawaii is a small island. So there was a mutation where a monarch had white coloring instead of the orange coloring. It's a recessive gene that does this. And so when two whites mate, you get some whites mixed in. And when oranges and whites mate, you get a mixture of both too, but tending towards oranges. When oranges mate, they tend to be orange unless there's both have recessives in them. But the weird thing is, because as an island where the population was small to begin with and limited, something like 10% of the monarch butterflies in Hawaii are now the white version, which is a really strange thing. So there's a white monarch in Hawaii. So here's the life cycle of the monarch butterfly. And I'm sure most of you have probably seen many pictures of kind of like this, if not when you were a kid in science class, perhaps more recently. What I'm always struck by is that every phase of the monarch butterfly's life cycle is beautiful, just really pretty. The egg, the larva, caterpillar, pupa, chrysalis, and the adult, all just remarkably pretty, remarkably handsome animals. Even that egg with that kind of nice sheen and the rows of white kind of dots lined up in there. So it's in the egg for about 4 days, and then when it pops out, this is what's called the first instars. So instars, even the young stages of insects, they molt, shed the outer skin and get a little bit bigger. So there are several instars as that the caterpillar goes through before it gets the chrysalis. So here's the first instar, which doesn't yet have the striping, but you can see the striping is just starting. And then here is the egg over here, that first instar, and then getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So you've got a couple of weeks of being a caterpillar like this. Oh, and as the caterpillar nibbles, it gets, here's the poop that comes out the other end, more commonly called frass, because it's a nicer word than the 5th grade boy poop. But here you are, and when you're looking for milkweed, when I'm looking for milkweed, I'll look for 2 things. When I'm looking for caterpillars on milkweed, there's often 2 things I'm looking for. One is if I see frass covering a leaf down here, odds are there's a monarch caterpillar hanging on up here. Also, if you see a big cutout leaf, there must have been a monarch munching on it. But here's the stages of the instars of the caterpillar. So they're just chewing very happily, internalizing those cardiac glucosides, staying poisonous, and then working their way up to adulthood. And then they don't become chrysalids on the milkweed. They often will retreat to a quieter place. I have found them on the underside of my porch glider, on the underside of the arm of the porch glider. We have that Wissahickon schist making up our chimney on the outside. They attach themselves to the Wissahickon schist. They attach themselves to the azalea bush. So there are many places. They often will be they will stay in the milkweed patch to eat, and then they'll go find a quiet place to become a chrysalis. And look at that. I don't quite know. I'm not sure anybody quite knows what the beautiful yellow and black dots are, but boy, it's striking. And I've seen jewelers make earrings out of this, essentially replicas in jewelry of a monarch chrysalis, and they're stunning. So, why you need such beauty, why that's what's adaptive about this beauty is, a great, great question. So there's the chrysalis of the monarch butterfly. It's there about 10 days. And then just up before, the day before it hatches, it turns kind of clear, and then you see what's inside, and then out it comes. Takes a little while to do this, and of course it's pumping water through its veins, and as it pumps water through the veins, the wings begin to essentially expand. And that's one of the huge reasons for veins in insect wings is they're all curled up inside the pupa, and then when they get out, the water pumps through them and makes them really big, and the wings dry out, and then you've got gorgeous wings for flying. So there's the monarch life cycle. And of course, when you're an adult, you can live anywhere from 2 to 6 weeks, and your job is to do 2 things. One, find food. And again, the caterpillar was eating milkweed leaves. The adult is now drinking the world. So it's going to anything with nectar. So any flower with nectar, any nectar-rich flower. So if you plant a butterfly garden and you put nectar flowers in it, you're going to get monarch butterflies, monarch adults. If you want to have the monarch life cycle, got to add milkweed to it, and then you'll be good. So there you are. So there it is and it's, as I said, 2 to 6 weeks, depending on a number of things, the weather, whether it meets a bird who's not yet tried monarch butterflies yet and wants to test one, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, how healthy the individual is. But then something really, really interesting happens, and this is where our story gets deeper. If you're a monarch that hatches out of a chrysalis in August and September, you belong to what's called the Methuselah generation. So it takes about a month for the monarch butterfly to go through the entire life cycle, right? So egg, caterpillar, cocoon, chrysalis, adult. So about a month to do all of that. And then again, 2 to 6 weeks for the adult to live, and then it passes on. The Methuselah generation could live 7, 8, or even 9 months, which is really a remarkable thing in the insect world. So suddenly the August ones are long-lived, and they go into reproductive diapause. Diapause, pause, right? They put a pause on things. So essentially their reproductive parts don't grow because they're not going to need them for a while. So you're not going to invest energy in building them because you've got to do something else that's really important. And you are born in the Methuselah generation with different proteins. The genes create different proteins that allow you to fly differently. The generations before Methuselah are sprinters. This generation are marathoners. So they have proteins that allow them to fly far and long, but not necessarily so fast, because they're going to go, as so many of you know, all the way to Mexico, and not just anywhere in Mexico. They're going to some secluded valleys 50 miles west of Mexico City. So all of the monarch butterflies in Eastern North America are going to make it, and you know, Pennsylvania is like 2,000 miles away, to Mexico, west of Mexico City. It's just a crazy, crazy thing. So essentially, this butterfly is 4 generations removed from a great-great-grandparent who made this trip. So somehow 4 generations later, they have the GPS to get back to that same place, which is a crazy thing. And that for me is a piece of the miracle, that they know, air quotes around the word know, how to do this. Also want to point out, there's a non-migratory population that hangs out in Florida. So they don't need to go anywhere, and they don't. So there are those as well. But in East North America, this gang is all going, and that's where they are right now. That's where our monarchs are right now. So, of course, remember NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement, wonderfully chose the monarch as its symbol because it goes among all 3 countries, from Canada to the United States, all the way down to Mexico and then back. Couple other things to notice. Actually, they are in Canada, sort of the southern edge of Canada, because this is the northern limit of milkweed. The Pacific Northwest, for reasons I don't know yet, doesn't have any milkweed, so there are no monarchs up there. And here's the other cool thing is, if you're a monarch living west of the Rockies, you're heading downhill and you're wintering on the coast of California. I've not been to Mexico City. I have been to California. Santa Cruz has one of the populations that are there. So there are several towns that have them. It's just a great site. We'll talk about those in a few minutes too. And there's something else to pay attention to if you live in this area. Look how New Jersey is kind of shaped like a funnel. So if you're a monarch flying down here through all of New Jersey and you want to get south, right? You make it to Cape May Point and then you go, oops. And here at Cape May Point, you wait until the weather conditions are right. So all of Jersey and much of the East Coast's monarchs funnel down to Cape May Point. And then when the weather is right, they make the leap across the bay. So they want a tailwind probably. They don't want a headwind for sure. So there's some weather conditions they're looking for, and they'll wait those out, and then they make the leap. And that's a great thing to do. So there's some seaside goldenrod with some monarch butterflies nectaring on them. And of course, they're doing this at the same season that all the birders are down in Cape May, going crazy, looking at all the migrating birds that are also passing over Cape May Point for that same reason. So that funnel also is where all the hawks and eagles are also flying over to get across. They're making the jump too, and all the songbirds. So when I go to Cape May Point, it's just lovely. You've got all the ducks in front of you on the pond. You've got songbirds and warblers like in the bushes right around you in front of you. And then also you've got monarchs. And here are some monarchs at Cape May. But this is down towards Mexico now. So again, this is just a crazy thing that they have the ability to do this. And as they fly down, they actually fly along the front of the Sierra Madres. So they kind of can do that pretty easily. Follow, and then they sort of go over this little hump here and then they're getting down here to these little places. So they have a route that they tend to travel to get there. But again, you know, and the there is, again, we're 50 miles west of Mexico City. There's about 12 small patches of fir trees. Oyamel is the name in Mexico in Spanish. So we call them Oyamel firs. Those are the trees that the monarchs are looking for. It's got the microhabitat that they're looking for, the right humidity and the right temperature, and it allows them to essentially stay in kind of a torpor through the winter. And so they're all clustering on the branches of the oyamel together. They're staying warm by clustering with each other, but there's 12 discrete patches in and around in the west of Mexico City. How do they do this? Scientists still don't know every piece of the puzzle. So here it is, 2023. There's still a lot about this that we don't understand. There's arguments about pieces of it as well. Study A says this, study B says something different. So they're still arguing about a piece of it. But let's tease out a few things. One is they have a sense of daytime. They have a sense of morning and afternoon. So they do have an internal clock. And with that internal clock, they also have a sun compass. So they know on the left, when it's morning time, that south is going to be to the right of the sun. They know around noon that south is going to be flying straight into the sun. And they know in the afternoon, if you want to go south, you go to the left of the sun. So that's one piece of it. One of the big fights is whether magnetic fields play a role in this. And I think the most recent study confirms that, yes, the Earth's magnetic field does play a role, which makes sense as well. So there's a sun compass, there's a diurnal daytime-nighttime clock going on, and then there's the magnetic fields are all dovetailing. So it's one thing that they know to fly south. It's something else that they then know. How do they know? To get to one of these 12 valleys where all of their neighbors from places like Jersey and Nova Scotia and Nebraska will all be. It's just wild. And so when you're down there, and I've not yet been, it's just a remarkable sight to see the clouds of monarch butterflies flying through the air and then coating the oyamel. So I'll just pause for a moment and just let you enjoy these photos. So I hope you will forgive me this, but this is from the PBS show Nature, just a couple of minutes of it. And what they did is they did this remarkable thing where they created a drone, a flying drone with a camera attached to it that looks like a hummingbird, and the propellers are covered. So it looks like a hummingbird, the propellers won't hurt them. And so they got really close. And I just want to show you this.
Heart of this grove.
So I want you
Half
to
a
see that.
billion monarch butterflies.
There we go. So I just thought that was such a special thing to see the whole swarm coming on as the day warmed up. So they're leaving here in America in, like, you know, September, October. And they're getting there just amazingly around the Day of the Dead, right? And there is lots of discussion among anthropologists about the roots of, was it Dia de los Muertos, the Day of the Dead, in Mexico. So there's Aztec components mixed with Spanish conquistador components. So it's kind of moshed together. But nonetheless, monarch butterflies typically arrive in these sanctuaries in and around the Day of the Dead. So it turns out that in Day of the Dead celebrations in Mexico, there's a lot of monarch elements to it. So in the costuming that they do, you'll often see a thread of monarch butterflies woven through it, which is just really great. And the costuming is just really beautiful on that day. The official flower of the day is the Mexican marigold, which we can buy in Home Depot, but they call it the African marigold. Don't know how that happened, but nonetheless, it's the Mexican marigold. It's a Mexican plant. It's in the Aster clan, and it is that bright orange color. And so the monarchs arrive, right? Just as this orange flower is in bloom. So the marigold becomes the official flower of the Day of the Dead. And the legend is that Aztec warriors are carried, the souls of Aztec warriors are carried on the wings of monarch butterflies. And as the monarch butterflies fly, scales fall off their wings, cover the landscape. And that's why we've got orange Mexican marigolds. So it's just a beautiful mashup of things. And so there's a Day of the Dead decoration with monarchs and marigolds. So you'll often see that in Mexico, not just in Mexico. This is a photograph from LA. So Mexican Americans have brought Day of the Dead celebrations, of course, up into the New World. And here again is marigolds plus monarchs. And my favorite, that's just so striking. And look at the headdresses are the swarms of monarchs up in the trees, right? So swarms of monarchs in big, beautiful monarch costumes. I was Googling butterfly images and monarch images and came across an extraordinary photograph of Sitting Bull, who was a Lakota Sioux warrior who died in 1890. Most people know the name Sitting Bull, but don't know why they know the name Sitting Bull. So an important Native American in our history. And I was struck by the hat. Look at the top of the hat. So I don't know why yet. I want to track this down, but there's a monarch butterfly essentially pinned to the top of Sitting Bull's hat. But so they're there now, and soon they will start leaving, and they'll begin to make the journey back north again. And they have a couple of routes that they tend to take. There's one that hugs the water, and then one that goes back along the edge of the ridges. So depending on weather and other circumstances, they'll go in two different directions. They'll make it back. Males and females both head north together. They've often made it already down in Mexico, but the male needs to escort the female because typically this is true of many insects, the male who fertilizes the female is the last one she's mated with. So they want to get up there with them and mate as quickly as they can or at the end. And what happens is the monarchs that are in Mexico will fly into northern Mexico, Texas, Louisiana. They'll find the first milkweed they can. Hopefully they timed it right, so milkweed's coming up. They'll mate, lay their eggs on the underside of milkweed, and the Methuselahs all pass out from exhaustion. They've done the job. They've completed the cycle. It took them a long time to do it, but they've done it. And so then this next generation pushes forward a little bit. And so this generation, Methuselah leaves. The first generation is down here. A second generation is here. So we might see the second or even the third generation here in Pennsylvania. It might even be the third generation who doesn't make it. So you've got March, April, May, June, they would not come to us by May. So there's the extraordinary life cycle. And now I just want to get into the but. So as many of you know, monarchs have been struggling in recent, not just years, but decades from a number of things. So unfortunately, so much of the corn and soybeans that we grow and use across much of Middle America, especially the Midwest, is Roundup ready. So it's essentially been genetically modified so that the plant can withstand Roundup. And so Roundup is sprayed on the plant. The plant itself is fine, but all the weeds around it die. Milkweed used to thrive in the patches between rows, the patches between fields, roadsides. But with Roundup ready stuff being sprayed, milkweed doesn't make it so well. No weed does. And so there's an issue with what are now called milkweed deserts for monarchs. They get into the middle of America and they can't get past the milkweed desert. That's been a real struggle. There is always an issue with logging in so many environmentally sensitive places across the whole planet. Logging and overlogging is always problematic. So, Mexico has worked really hard on this issue, but there were boom and bust years with logging and illegal logging. The concern in the pandemic was that when the economy collapsed, people would turn to illegal logging to make it through. So Mexico works on this really hard, but it's always a series of fits and starts. Here, for example, you see how these are the oil mill trees, and you can see this kind of orangey blush to the trees. Those are monarchs. So again, when they fold their wings up and they're resting, you see the duller color. It's the brighter color on this side. So those are monarchs. And look at the fields right down below. So these fields have been logged over and turned into farmland. So again, we need to protect. We need to find ways, we'll talk about this in a second, but to protect the monarchs while making sure that the people who live there are economically viable. So there we go. Climate change is a huge issue, as we know. If climate change alters the timing of milkweed blooming in Texas, and the monarchs arrive at the wrong time, then we're in deep trouble. So there's only now studies being done on the impact of climate change on monarch butterflies. And as we know, I'll go back to this. California's also had I'll come back to California in a second. So you may have seen versions of slides like this. So scientists don't count individual monarchs or even guess how many monarchs are in the swarm, right? That's challenging. But what they do is count the number of hectares of trees covered in monarchs. So that's a measurable way to do this. So what's the square feet hectares they're using, right? Of land, of forest that the monarchs are occupying in the winter. And you can see 25 years ago, there was like almost 19 hectares. And now you can see that there's been a downward trend. 1314 was dangerously tiny, a little bit better. But insects tend to also do boom and bust, and weather patterns can greatly influence what happens. But look at this, the most recent number, 2021, 2 hectares. Now, what's a hectare? A hectare is a football field, basically. So Eastern North America's monarch butterfly population is sitting in 2 football fields of Oyamel fir forests west of Mexico City. That's kind of scary. And that's what, if there's a bad storm, if there's a bad year with logging, you can see that would have a dramatic impact right away. And this is a different study that backs it up, that shows that in the years between 93 and 2001, they had roughly 8, almost 9 hectares. Then the next decade it went up down to 5, and then the next decade 2.6. So not a good trend. Lots of work being done on this. We'll talk about that in a second, but nonetheless, the trend is pretty bad. I was thinking about the Western monarchs and, wondering maybe they're doing better and there's hope for the species if we retain the Western monarchs. But as it turns out, Western monarchs recently have been having even worse years than monarchs. Look at in 2020, there were only 1,899. Now they're counting, estimating individuals. So there were only 1,900 individual monarch butterflies in those California sites. Big bump up the next year. So again, insects do this boom and bust thing. But again, we're looking at trends and the trends are down. That's a little scary. And if you look at heat, a map of heat, look at California, just a fierce drought, fierce heat, big wildfires, right? California seems to be the epicenter of climate change in America now. Just everything that happens seems to go through California, even recently this winter, when, what do they call it, a parade of storms? Like storm after storm after storm slammed into California. And I can't even imagine what a grove of monarch butterflies, just inland from these storms, how the monarchs are hanging on. So I'm just terrified of what this next year is going to look like for the Western monarch. So you'll see the Xerxes Society is one of the places that works really hard on conserving insect species. Insects are often overlooked. There's so many charismatic animals like mountain lions, whales, etc. Bugs get overlooked, but Xerxes is a great organization that's fighting for insects like the Western monarchs. The International Union for the Conservation of Nature publishes a red list of threatened and endangered species. They've been doing this for more than 50 years now. And they have put the monarch butterfly, if you look at the bottom left, you'll see it's the migratory monarch butterfly they have put on their endangered species list. That has no power in the United States. It impacts no policy in the United States, but there is pressure in the US to also officially call the monarch endangered. The government has said in the Biden administration that we're sympathetic, we hear you, but there are so many other species before that that we have to get to. So it's down in the queue, sadly enough, which is really disappointing and hard for me. So again, we're not going to lose monarchs because we have monarchs in all these strange and weird places. What we're going to lose is the migration phenomenon. We're going to lose the species, and again, I'm going to use air quotes, knows how to get from Philadelphia to Mexico City and get back. So that's what people like me are worried about. So lots of things happening on lots of fronts. One is, as we noted before, is to make the people who live in and around the sanctuaries, to help them have economically viable lifestyles, find a way to make money that doesn't involve cutting down the forest. So it turns out there's a huge ecotourism component to monarch butterflies. Ecotourism, especially Americans coming down to see the monarch butterflies, and so the local population, they're engaged in policing the areas and giving the tours and leading the tours in, getting people in on the trails and up into the tours, buses, so that whole infrastructure for ecotourism has been a real boon for these communities in Mexico. You see the Santuario de la Mariposa Monarca, right? Sanctuary of the monarch butterfly, Mariposa butterfly. Welcome, bienvenidos. And so here's a craftsman working with, these are not the OML fir because they're too small, but these are the needles from fir trees and pine trees, evergreen trees in that area. I've got my own little, I know I bought this a few years ago from somebody who was selling them up in New York State. But again, this is a hot plate made from, made by one of these artisans in this community. So there's lots of things you can do to help. And here are some of the murals in the towns near that. And of course, so many people, I'm sure a lot of you plant milkweed. In fact, there's been a whole campaign starting maybe 20 years ago already. Got Milkweed, very clever riff on Got Milk, right? Got Milkweed, and t-shirts and hoodies, all kinds of Got Milkweed stuff. And that's great if that, especially if what you're buying is supportive of the work of organizations like Xerxes. Lots of people are doing butterfly gardening, places like the Schuylkill Center, places like maybe your backyard. So lots of butterfly gardening. There's lots of books. Here's Xerxes' book on 100 plants to feed the monarch. So not just milkweed, but here's all the nectaring plants. Having your site an official pollinator habitat. We have a monarch way station at our front door, so you can do this as well. So there's many ways. Lots of people help tag monarchs, which is giving us invaluable scientific information on where monarchs, how long it takes a monarch to get from A to B, and what the route is that they use to get there. I mentioned Xerxes several times by supporting organizations like Xerxes, like Monarch Watch, organizations that are trying to protect and preserve the monarch. And of course, one of the most powerful things you can do is buy organic. And as you know, there's an unprecedented amount of organic food around these days. Whole Foods, Mom's Organic. Wow, even the Acme has a huge organic section, and Super Fresh. They're all doing it right now. So the more organic food more of us buy, the better the future may be for monarch butterflies. And I do think that it's important to get listed on the endangered species list in the United States so that we can have a plan for making sure that we keep it with us, a plan that's adapted for our country. So, because all of us, I think, want to keep monarchs around. And I know it's just after 8. I went a little bit over. We're going to take questions in a minute, but I just want to end on one quick note. That another way to protect monarchs is to think like butterflies. So here's a caterpillar who, look at how they've skeletonized this milkweed. There's so many caterpillars have been on this milkweed plant that there are no leaves left to it. So caterpillars are really hungry. They're like Eric Carle's very hungry caterpillar. They devour things. They're little lawnmowers. They just eat. They don't eat sausages and lollipops that the very hungry caterpillar does, but they're little lawnmowers and they just keep going. And when you think about it, it's not a very sustainable lifestyle, right? They're devouring the plant. They've almost killed the plant. That's their host plant. So I feel, for me, it feels like nature made a deal. We can let you do that. We can let you get away with being a caterpillar if you then transform into a butterfly that can't eat any solid food. And all you do is fly from flower to flower to flower, pollinating flower to flower to flower, as if you're saying, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. So the next generation of butterflies, of caterpillars, gets to exist because the adult butterflies are pollinating. So if we think like butterflies, we're going to give back to the resources that sustain us. Unfortunately, humankind is kind of stuck in a caterpillar stage where we're taking and taking and taking and taking. We need to become butterflies and give back, so that we'll always have them. And you know, people have been thinking about how humans interact with the environment for a very, very long time. And here's H.G. Wells, who goes back about 150 years, who wrote, back then, human history becomes more and more a race between education and catastrophe. And so we have a lot of people to teach. You guys are all converts. I'm so glad that you're here, but we need to reach a lot more people so that we can always have monarchs flying around us, so that when Day of the Dead comes, monarchs are flying back into Mexico and coming back to North America in the spring. I'm looking forward to seeing them again soon. And you're going to come back next week for Urban Wildlife Sharing Spaces, and the week after for that. So if you've got questions in chat, put them in. And Zaina is going to unmute herself and she's going to read questions. And it is 8:06. If anybody has to leave, feel free to leave anytime and sign off. Love to have you stay. We'll just do like 10 minutes of questions and then we'll end the evening. But I'm so glad you're all here. Hey, Zaina, how are you?
I'm good, Mike. Thank you for the wonderful lecture. We all really enjoyed it. I think we can all agree on that. But
Thank you.
we have a couple questions.
Yeah.
So we're going to start with Amy, and she's asking, how far can a monarch fly before it needs to rest or refuel?
What a great question. And I don't know the answer for sure. If somebody else does and wants to put the answer in chat, please do. But I think it's very weather dependent. So if the breezes are blowing in the right direction, they can get pretty far. But again, they got 2,000 miles to go and a month or two to do it. So you can do the math, and they have to book for a bit. Yeah, but I don't know how much they do per day. Yeah.
Okay. We have two questions from Ed.
Yeah.
So we're going to start with the first one. So he
Hey,
says,
Ed.
Hi, Ed. I think he's a loyal Thursday Night Live
He is.
attendee. Yeah. So his first question is, are there a significant number of butterflies out now? Because he happened to see his first butterfly of the year just yesterday.
Yesterday. Oh my God. Ed, was it a cabbage white or somebody else? Do you know what it was? So this is a crazy spring so far. I actually noticed yesterday that there were red maple. If you know, red maple has those little tiny red flowers and they sort of form a blush on twigs. I saw some were opening and it just feels like, wow, it just feels way too early for that to be happening. So I feel like we're having an early spring because it's so warm and there never was much of a winter to speak of. So I don't know. I'm kind of worried about how this is all going to shake out. But yeah, this is way too early for butterflies.
Okay, and his second question is, do monarch caterpillars hide from predators like other caterpillars? An example of curling a leaf around itself to hide, maybe?
Yeah, they don't curl leaves. So what they do a couple of things. One is they got the bright striping that warns you of their color, but also when I find them, I tend to find them on the underside of leaves, which is kind of a nice way to hide. And so they'll be on the underside and stick their head up and they're sort of nibbling on the leaf edge, but they're kind of under, which is why the frass drops on the leaf right below it, and that's how you find them.
Okay, great. And Jen is asking, she has common milkweed that has invaded her vegetable garden.
Yeah.
So can these coexist?
Well, it depends on what kind of gardener you are. I'll say yes. They can be aggressive. They can get really tall and they can spread and come up again. So, if you want to try it out and see if you think they can coexist. And if not, try to move it perhaps, or plant some new milkweed somewhere else and then pull it out.
Okay, great. We have 2 more questions. So one from Rebecca, the Methuselah generation aside, how long do the other generations of monarchs live?
Yeah, like a month. Like they go through the whole life cycle. I'm sorry, they get to the adult by a month, and then the adult is like 2 to 6 weeks. Yeah. So within 2 months, that butterfly has passed away.
Okay. And our last question from Valerie is it a good practice to take in and keep monarch caterpillars in a habitat until they develop into butterflies?
What a great question. Actually, just today I heard from somebody who couldn't come to the talk, but she's part of a volunteer program at a senior center where they bring them in, rear them. When they become butterflies, they they tag them and then release them outside. So that's an organized campaign at a senior center, which is quite a remarkable thing. So yeah, you have to be really committed to it, and that you follow up. You have to make sure maybe you might need somebody who can train you in it. So I just want to be mindful that it's not as easy a thing to do as it might seem. But I would say try it. Somebody wanted the QR code. There you go.
Okay, and that is all of our questions. Thank you everyone for such thoughtful questions. We love to hear them. If you have any more, we're always willing to listen to them in our next Thursday Night Live. So hope to see you guys there.
Yeah, so next week, urban wildlife. Thank you, Zaina. And feel free, everybody, to unmute yourself and say thank you and good night to anybody. So thank you for being here. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Wonderful.
Thank you. It's wonderful.
Awesome. Thanks.
Thank you. I really enjoyed it, and I had last week's program too.
Thank you. That was a really great presentation.
Thank you, Rebecca. Thank you so much. So glad you're here.
Me too.
Really enjoyed it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Judy, how'd I do? You're muted, but you're smiling, so I'll make sure.
I'm going to try and unmute. I'm saying thank you. It was a pleasure to
Oh, I'm
take
so
that
glad.
journey with you again, and you do a beautiful job. I've had the good fortune of spending time in Mexico, and I learned about monarchs in California. So it was home sweet home in such a beautiful way. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so
Appreciate
much. Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Have a great night.
Thanks.
Thank you all.
Yep.